My name is Isabella Monroe, 37 years old, living in Colorado Springs. I'm the founder and CEO of the high-end furniture company Clay and Pine. Few people know that behind the million-dollar contracts and magazine covers I've appeared on lies a life marked by betrayal, by the very people I once loved the most. My younger sister Natalie is 4 years younger than me. I once protected her like she was my own child. When our parents died in a car accident when I was 18, I gave up a full scholarship to Brown University to stay home and raise her. I worked during the day and took online classes at night, just to make sure Natalie could graduate high school like a normal kid. She used to crawl into my bed crying after nightmares. Once, I worked 3 jobs at the same time just to pay for her art camp. I used to believe that blood ties could never betray you. I was wrong. When I started my business, Natalie studied communications at UCLA. We stayed in touch, FaceTiming every weekend. She never missed sending me a birthday card. But things started to shift. The little sister who used to giggle when I braided her hair as a child began offering smiles that never quite reached her eyes. Then came Evan, my husband. We met during an interior design auction in Dallas back in my early days of building Clay and Pine. He was charming, calm, spoke like he had a script tailored for every situation. At first, I thought it was sophistication. Now I know it was performance. After our wedding, I brought him onto the executive board as a strategic advisor. I had no idea that for 3 years, Evan and Natalie were secretly meeting, planning, and carefully executing a scheme to erase me from my own life, step by step, like a corporate project with deadly precision. I first grew suspicious when life insurance policies in my name were quietly expanded. 3 new policies totaling nearly $4.8 million, all signed in case of emergency. I remember frowning when Evan handed me the paperwork. He smiled and said, "Just a precaution, Bella. You're the CEO. You can't go without full coverage." And Natalie, she started showing up more often at company events, always sticking close to Evan, laughing, speaking casually, even draping her arm over his shoulder in photos. Back then, I still told myself, she just sees him like an older brother. Naive. A month before the Aspen trip, I caught them exchanging a look in the conference room mirror. I had walked in earlier than planned. That look wasn't familial. It wasn't accidental. It was cold and clear enough to make me want to turn around and walk back out. I used to think betrayal came softly, through a few lies, a few hushed phone calls. I never imagined someone would plan to kill me. Literally, just to steal the company I built from scratch. They had scripted everything. A tragic aviation accident, a private helicopter ride to Elkridge that Evan pitched as a surprise for our 8th anniversary. Of course, Natalie would join, because the two of us haven't traveled together in so long. The documents I signed that week, they'd buried them between stacks of internal adjustments and routine memos. I didn't realize my signature was being weaponized to authorize withdrawals, transfer equity, even alter the emergency succession plan. I trusted too much. Trusted a husband who once held my hand when all I had was an idea and a garage office. Trusted a sister who once fell asleep on my shoulder night after night as a child. But what I believed to be family was nothing more than a well-polished mask hiding ambition sharp enough to kill. I remember that morning in Aspen vividly. Bone-chilling cold, yet sunlight still filtered through the snow-covered pines with a strange brilliance. Evan wrapped his arms around me as we stood beside the humming helicopter. He whispered into my ear, "This is your anniversary gift. You'll remember it forever." I forced a smile, trying to quiet the unease rising in my chest. The cashmere coat wrapped around my shoulders wasn't enough to warm the kind of cold growing beneath my ribs, like a silent alarm going off. Natalie approached, slowly, unusually radiant, with deep red lipstick and a white fur coat that made her look like she had stepped out of an ad campaign. "I thought you deserved a proper date in the clouds," she said with a bright grin, handing me a paper cup of hot cocoa. "I brought this for you." I took the cup, my frozen fingers brushing hers. We weren't as close as we used to be, but I still clung to the hope that distance and adulthood had simply changed us. I was wrong. Again. Inside the helicopter, the seats were upholstered in ash-grab leather, the curved glass windows reflecting the morning light like a lake surface. I sat in the middle, Evan to my left, Natalie to my right. The pilot, an older man named George, confirmed our flight would be around 40 minutes, with a stop at a small landing pad near Bear Claw Ridge. I glanced at Evan. He was adjusting my harness, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. His expression hadn't changed since his first media interview. Calm, polished, unreadable. "Relax," he said. "Everything's been arranged perfectly." I turned to look out the window where snow-covered peaks rose in silence. The cold inside me started to seep deeper, pressing through layers of wool and fabric. Once we reached cruising altitude, Natalie pulled out her phone. "Let's take a photo," she said. "Come on, tilt your head a little." I turned toward her, managing a half smile. My face showed up faintly in her phone screen, framed between the two people I had once loved most in this world. "Smile," she murmured, leaning in so her lips brushed my ear. "You've always been the leading lady, haven't you?" Her tone was light, but the drop in her voice on the word leading sent a chill down my spine. As the helicopter tilted slightly to arc around a ridge, I noticed her hand slide across to my seatbelt. I turned, ready to ask something, but she didn't speak. She just stared, deep, deliberate, and smiled. You know, her voice was nearly a whisper. "You've always been in the way." It didn't sound like a comment, it sounded like a sentence. Then, suddenly, she shoved my shoulder hard. I didn't have time to react. A force from my right hurled me toward the door, just as the harness, the one Evan had so kindly checked, came undone like it had been loosened long before. I flailed midair. The world flipped inside out. I caught Evan's eyes. He didn't scream. He didn't lunge. He just crossed his arms, stared at me, didn't blink. Once I believed he would save me from failure. In that moment I realized I was the failure he wanted to erase. I fell. There was no scream, no gust of wind to pull me back, just freezing emptiness and the thick white of snow, and clouds swallowing me whole. I thought of my mother, how she used to hold me and tell me I was strong. I thought of Natalie's tiny hand gripping mine during storms. I thought of Evan kissing my forehead on our wedding day, promising never to let go. All of it, just memories, used against me. Then I saw a branch. A splash of green in a sea of white. Instinct kicked in. I reached, desperate. My fingers latched on. The impact nearly dislocated my shoulder, pain exploding down my back. But I didn't fall. I had breath, and as long as I could breathe, I was alive. And I swore in that moment, they will regret this. I don't remember how long I was suspended on that tree branch. All I knew was that once the pain from my left shoulder spread down my spine, tearing through every muscle fiber, I realized it was fully dislocated. And my right leg? Numb, except for a deep, throbbing pulse every time the icy wind hit. I was alive, but in this state, I wasn't sure how long that would last. The snow was thick. Every breath felt like a blade slicing down my throat. I clenched my teeth, grabbed the trunk with my uninjured hand, and slid down inch by inch into nearly 3 feet of snow. The landing nearly knocked me out. Everything went dark for a second, but instinct snapped me awake. No one knew I was alive. No one was looking. If anything, they were probably hoping I'd vanish for good. I lay motionless at the base of the tree. Everything hurt, like every cell in my body was rejecting my existence. I touched my forehead. Blood. A gash just along the hairline, freezing and sticky. I tore my wool scarf into strips and wrapped them around my left shoulder to hold the joint in place. My right knee still moved, but the shin bone was clearly fractured. I found a sturdy branch, tied it to my leg using the elastic drawcord from my inner jacket. By the time I finished, my breath came in shallow, broken gasps. Off in the distance, something poked through the snow. An old, gray roof. Maybe a cabin, maybe a forgotten outpost. Either way, it was the only chance I had. I began dragging myself toward it. Every pull sent fire racing through my bones. I have no idea how long it took. The sun had just risen when I fell from the helicopter. Now it was sinking low behind the ridge. The sky had turned violet, and the silence around me was eerie, broken only by the creak of frozen wood under the snow as I slid forward. At last, my hand touched the weathered wall of the cabin. No lock. I pushed the door. It swung open, wind slapping my face like a brutal reminder that I was still alive. Inside, it was dark and dusty, an old table, a wood-burning stove, a medical box on the wall, a bed covered in grime. I crawled to the first aid kit. My hands shook so badly I could barely unclip the latch. Eventually, I got out some gauze, a bottle of alcohol, and a rusted survival knife. I cleaned the gash on my head, bandaged it, and stitched up my leg with a thin rope from the kit. No power, no cell signal, but there was a radio on the shelf. I turned the dial. After several bursts of static, I picked up a local channel. Through the distortion, a woman's voice came through. The missing victim has been identified as Isabella Monroe, 37 years old, CEO of Clay and Pine. The helicopter is believed to have crashed early this morning near Bear Claw Ridge. The body has not yet been recovered. I froze. The body has not yet been recovered. No phrase hits harder than that, as if I was already a corpse, just waiting to be found. I let out a dry, bitter laugh and then coughed so hard I spat up blood. My fist clenched. I sat there, bleeding, broken, alone, but not defeated. They think I'm dead. They're probably already planning how to spend my money. But I'm still here, in a rotting cabin, with every throb of pain reminding me that I still have time. Time to strike back. In the drawer, I found an old map marked with hunting trails. One route was highlighted in green, possibly a ranger station, about 2 miles out. With my leg, that was hours, maybe a full day. I lay on my side, propping my leg up on the wooden frame, pressing a pillow to my stomach to ease the pain with every breath. In the dark, I listened to the wind howl through the roof, almost like someone calling my name. But no one was coming. I'd have to save myself, just like always. I left the cabin the next morning, just before dawn. Snow blanketed the trail like it was trying to trap me. The cold sank into my bones, but I didn't care anymore. Every step was a clenched teeth effort. I kept telling myself, if I'm not dead, it means I can still fight. I followed the southern trail marked on the old map, heading toward an abandoned ranger station. When I arrived, I banged on the wooden door. Blood seeped through the bandage that had loosened overnight. Inside the dusty room was an old satellite phone connected to a small solar battery. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking, and dialed the number I'd memorized for 10 years. Vera Laney, co-founder of Clay and Pine, and the only person I trusted now. The phone rang 3 times. Hello? Vera, it's me, Isabella. No answer at first. I heard something crash on her end, followed by rushing footsteps. Oh my God. They said you were... I know. Listen to me. I don't have much time. I need you to check all company accounts, every share transfer after the 11th of this month. And? They already drained it, Isabella, she said, her voice trembling. The reserve account's down almost $1.2 million. The life insurance policy, it's already been processed. I closed my eyes. One heartbeat skipped. They didn't even wait a day to turn me into a memory. I need evidence. Do you still have access to the accounting server? Yes, but I can't do this alone. Then find Tyler. He used to work IT in the security department. He's with Westlake Cyber now. He owes me a favor from back in 2019. Tell him I'm calling it in. He'll understand. 2 days later, I made it to a small town on the forest's edge, Carver Creek. One gas station, one 24-hour diner. I walked in, coat filthy, dried blood on my sleeves. The young waitress froze like she'd seen a ghost. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I pointed to the landline behind the counter. "I need to call, no questions." She nodded, stepping back, eyes fixed on my limping leg. I turned to the wall and dialed Vera's number. One ring. "I'm in Carver Creek. Bring the laptop, bring hard copies, and come alone." An hour later, Vera walked into the diner, black coat, dark circles under alert eyes. She carried a laptop and a thick folder. We sat in the farthest corner of the room, under a flickering yellow bulb. "You shouldn't be here," she said, "but I'm guessing you don't have another option." I opened the laptop. What Tyler had found left me breathless. Emails between Evan and Natalie, encrypted, now decrypted, cold, calculated. She won't survive if the strap loosens at the right time. I checked the safety latch before takeoff. "Money's through. You need to wipe the logs from the internal system." I flipped to the insurance contract copy. My signature. But the scan was manipulated. I'd never signed that. Not in that format. Not at that address. "And the money trail," Vera added. "They funneled the funds through a Delaware LLC called Silverlight Holdings. The registered owner's a fake name, but the tax ID," she pushed another document toward me, "belongs to Natalie's biological mother." I couldn't speak. My throat was dry. My hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. "And one more thing," Vera whispered. "Someone wants to meet you. Said he used to work with Natalie. Got burned by her. He has more evidence, and well, he doesn't want money." "What's his name?" "Lucas Briggs. He's a security guard at the Skyloft building in Denver. He told me to pass this on. I once heard Natalie say, if she doesn't die from the fall, she'll die when the paperwork disappears." I locked eyes with Vera. My blood boiled, not from rage, but because I knew I had a weapon. My funeral was held at Ridgeview Memorial Chapel, a white-domed chapel tucked into the west hillside of Denver, where the wealthy often book their forever seats early. I stood across the slope, just steps from the main doors, wind whipping through my floor-length black coat. In my hand was a leather-bound document case, thick and heavy, cold, like everything they had done. Evan Monroe was speaking inside. His voice came through a small speaker on the lawn. Isabella wasn't just a life partner, she was the soul of Clay and Pine. We grieve not only the loss of a CEO, but of a remarkable woman. I clenched the strap of the case. Remarkable? Just last week, he signed a fake death certificate to withdraw over $1 million from the life insurance policy, along with my sister. They didn't know I'd returned. No one knew I'd walk through those doors, except Vera and the man waiting beside the car. Lucas Briggs. "Are you sure?" Lucas asked one last time, his hand resting on the brim of his hat. "More sure than the fact I'm still alive." I walked straight into the funeral hall. No one stopped me. A few guests turned, then froze, then fell silent. They looked at me like a ghost appearing in daylight. I passed the oversized black and white poster of myself, a ribbon on the corner reading, "In Loving Memory." That photo was taken at the architecture conference in San Diego. I remembered because Natalie had told me to smile less so I wouldn't wrinkle my forehead. The auditorium doors opened before me, a sea of black. Whispers, eyes locked on me. Some stood, some pulled out their phones. I walked, step by steady step. Each heel against the stone floor landed like a blow to the lies they'd built. Evan stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked on me like he'd just seen the physical proof of his guilt. Beside him, Natalie sat in the front row, her eyes wide as teacups, handkerchief slipping from her fingers. I stopped in the center, where every eye converged. Calmly, I opened my case and pulled out the stack of documents. "I think," I said, voice loud enough to carry without a mic, "the so-called deceased should have a few words, don't you?" A deathly silence. Then a camera shutter clicked. Evan regained composure faster than I expected. He took a few steps forward, his tone soft as always. Bella, my God, how are you? You're alive. We thought you dead? I tilted my head, not breaking eye contact. I know. You planned the funeral so fast, I thought I was watching a trailer for my own biopic. You're misunderstanding. There's so much going on. He stammered, reaching for me. I stepped back. No touching. The crowd held their breath. A few cameras, hidden by the press and attendants, now angled toward me. Vera had quietly entered too, like a shadow, standing at the back with a laptop in hand. I looked at Natalie. She didn't stand, just clutched her beige purse like it was her last shred of dignity. All of you came here today to mourn someone who lived with integrity, so look closely. I'm here, alive, betrayed by the two people closest to me. I raised the folder. This is the life insurance policy in my name, cashed out the same day I fell from that helicopter. Forged signature. And here, emails between the grieving husband and the devastated sister. Minute by minute details of how they'd erase me from this world and from the company. Gasps rippled. People murmured. More phones came out. I continued. And if anyone needs proof beyond paper. I turned to Vera. She nodded and hit a key. The big screen at the back of the room, formerly playing a slideshow of my childhood, flicked to a video. Natalie at a bar, raising a glass, to Evan. She's always been in the way. One push is all it'll take. No one spoke. Natalie leapt up, shouting, "That's doctored. It's fake. You're lying." I smiled, answering slowly, "No one can fake the eyes of a traitor." Evan's face went pale. He sank into his chair. And the funeral, their carefully staged tragedy, began to unravel. The atmosphere inside the chapel cracked, like shattered glass splitting from the center. After the video played, Natalie raising a glass with Evan, saying, "One little push is all it takes," the entire room fell into a deadly silence, then erupted like a storm. An older woman in the middle row gasped, "Oh, my God, she was pushed!" A group of reporters who had planned to snap a few polite funeral photos were now scrambling to go live on their phones, shoving microphones forward and shouting, "Breaking news! Woman declared dead appears at her own funeral, exposing attempted murder plot." Beside me, Evan was frozen stiff, but Natalie snapped. "Turn it off," she screamed, lunging at Vera. "Turn it off." The sharp clack of heels echoed off the marble as panic rippled through the crowd. But Vera calmly stepped back, holding her laptop like a shield. "Everyone's recording, Natalie. Turning off one screen won't stop the rest." Natalie shrieked and grabbed at the laptop, but just then a security officer from the venue emerged from stage left and grabbed her arm. "Let me go. You don't understand. She's insane," she howled. "She doesn't deserve to live." A corner of the room screamed. Some stepped back, others zoomed in with their phones. Evan finally shot to his feet, voice hoarse. This isn't what it looks like. We just..." I turned to him. "What are you going to say, Evan? That it was an accidental fall? That I unbuckled my seatbelt and threw myself out of the aircraft?" His face contorted, sweat beaded on his brow, and for the first time I didn't see the cold man I'd married. I saw fear. I turned to the crowd, voice steady and clear. "You're witnessing what I survived to tell. This isn't a tragedy. This is the truth. They're not mourning me. They're mourning the loss of their shot to steal everything I spent 15 years building." A few board members in the front row stood up. One silver-haired man, Mr. Miller, our CFO, shook his head in disbelief. "Evan, did you authorize those wire transfers after she was reported missing?" Evan said nothing, but the silence hit heavier than any confession. The woman, our HR director, slipped out the side door, phone pressed to her ear, face unreadable. I could guess who she was calling. Meanwhile, Natalie, now restrained by two security guards, sat on the floor, hair a mess, lipstick smeared, sobbing and snarling. You always stole everything from me. Since we were kids, you always thought you were better. You always thought you deserved more love. I looked at her and, for the first time, didn't see an enemy. Just a child who never grew up, trapped in the shadows of envy. No, Natalie, I said softly, though everyone heard. I didn't steal anything. You just never learned how to stand on your own 2 feet. Police arrived less than 10 minutes after the clip went viral. A uniformed officer entered through the side, scanning the room, before locking eyes with me. Are you Isabella Monroe? We need to take your statement immediately. I nodded. But before leaving, I turned to face the entire chapel. This isn't the end. I didn't come for revenge. I came for the truth, and for those who buried it, to face the light. As I stepped out of the chapel, the late afternoon sun hit my face, strangely warm. Vera followed behind, and Lucas was already talking to a Channel 8 reporter. Inside, the funeral continued. But not for me, for the mask of lies they'd built, now buried under the weight of truth. The news of my return spread like wildfire during a dry Colorado summer. Within 2 hours of the funeral, my photo was on the front page of the Denver Ledger, under a blazing red headline, CEO returns from the dead, uncovers family coup plot. I hadn't even left the police station before the narrative started twisting. A social media account titled Relatives of Isabella began pushing vague accusations. The first post claimed I'd shown emotional instability, had suicidal tendencies, and even hinted that the fall from the helicopter was a deliberate cry for attention. Soon after, a few tabloid sites picked it up. New headlines emerged, this time laced with doubt. Isabella Monroe's shocking return, victim or manipulator. I sat in front of the laptop in Vera's apartment, fingers gripping my coffee mug so hard a thin crack split down the ceramic. They've started, I said. I know. But so have I, Vera replied, sliding a charcoal gray folder toward me. Inside was everything. At a handwriting analysis proving 3 insurance contracts and 2 withdrawal authorizations were forged. Bank statements showing suspicious transactions from Evan's device, made right after I was reported missing. And, most importantly, a full psychological evaluation confirming I had no history of instability. Ugh. We need to strike right where they're building their lie, Vera said, eyes sharp as steel. They want to bend the truth. Let's show them what a real break feels like. We launched our counterattack. First, an exclusive interview with the Denver Herald, where I detailed everything, from being pushed out of a helicopter to crawling across snowbanks, bleeding and freezing, surviving with nothing but an old map and a satellite phone. Next, we released video from the Clay and Pine Board's internal hearing. I presented financial evidence and played the clip of Evan telling Natalie, she won't survive if the harness loosens just in time. Finally, Vera's digital forensics team released a full analysis proving that the suicide confession audio clip shared by the fake account had been stitched together from a Zoom session I gave last year on crisis management. The media storm turned within 48 hours. When Channel 6 invited me for a live interview, I looked straight into the camera and said, I didn't come back to shock the world. I came back because the truth doesn't stay buried, not even beneath a fake funeral. After the broadcast, Clay and Pine's stock rose 12%, the first rebound since the day I disappeared. The board called an emergency session. Mr. Miller, the CFO, looked at me from the head of the table and said quietly, the board has reviewed all evidence. As founding shareholder and rightful CEO, Ms. Monroe, we unanimously vote to restore your full authority, effective immediately. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, stood, and adjusted the strap on my handbag. As I passed the empty seat that once belonged to Evan, I paused and smiled. 2 days later, my lawyer filed official charges in Denver County Court, accusing Evan Monroe and Natalie Monroe of attempted murder, inheritance fraud, forgery of legal documents, and financial embezzlement. The press called it the most explosive family lawsuit in Clay and Pine's history. Me? I just called it a necessary Thursday. Spring came late that year in Denver. Snow still clung to the red brick rooftops on the east side of the city, but I could already feel the quiet warmth of sunlight slipping into each of my steps. The hearings were over. The press had shifted to newer scandals. Evan and Natalie were awaiting trial on 12 counts, both criminal and civil. As for me, I didn't come back to bask in victory. I came back to live. My new apartment sat on the 13th floor, overlooking City Park West. It wasn't large, but every corner was arranged with my own hands. I kept the weathered wooden chair I once slept on in that mountain cabin, placing it by the window as a reminder. I had touched the bottom, and I'd risen from it. One Monday morning, I was invited to speak at a meeting of Dandelion Circle, a nonprofit supporting women who had survived violence and betrayal. I almost declined. I was never good at speaking about myself. But Vera, of course it was her, looked at me over her coffee and said, "There are wounds that only begin to heal when we're brave enough to tell someone they exist." So I stood there on a small wooden stage before nearly 50 women, with eyes weathered by experience and hands still trembling as they held on to hope. I didn't start with the helicopter story. I started with something simpler. I used to think the worst betrayal came from enemies. But the truth is, it hurts more when someone stabs you with the same hand you once held through a storm. The room went silent. I told them about crawling through the snow, about curling up in that cabin, clutching an old map, heart still beating for one reason only. Don't let them win. After the talk, a middle-aged woman approached me. Her face was marked with old burn scars, but her gaze was soft, unexpectedly so. "My husband locked me in our home for 3 years," she said. "But thanks to you, I know I'm not the only one who survived in a body torn apart with a spirit that still won't surrender." I held her hand, said nothing, just smiled. A little girl around 6 or 7 stood beside her, curly hair falling into her eyes, fingers clutching a scrap of shiny foil. "Miss Isabella," she whispered, as if afraid her voice might break me. "This is for you." I knelt. It was a paper crane, folded from a chocolate wrapper, edges a little crinkled, wings uneven but spread wide, like it was ready to fly. "For hope," she said, her eyes glowing. It took me a moment to speak. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll keep it, somewhere I can always see it." Even after they walked away, I was still standing there, the little crane cradled in my hand. I used to think healing came from grand victories, but no, it came from small, timely kindnesses. That afternoon, I returned to the Clay and Pine office, but this time not as a CEO. I stepped into the conference room where the design team was sketching ideas for an upcoming community initiative. On the whiteboard, in bold letters, it read, "Design for Dignity, a project to build safe spaces for women starting over." I quietly took a seat in an empty chair, nodded to the others. No one had to know I used to run it all. They only needed to know I was here to help build something. This time, not for shareholders, but for people like me, the ones who had once been pushed to the margins. That night, when the world quieted, I hung the paper crane by the window, where moonlight touched it every night, and with a pencil I wrote across its wings, "To be alive is a gift, but to live as yourself, that is the real victory." I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know if the scar on my shoulder will ever fade, but I know this. I don't need anyone's permission to exist. I'm still here, and I came back not for revenge, but to rewrite my story, line by line, chapter by chapter, in my own hand, and no one will ever tear it away again. Isabella's story reminds us that the most brutal betrayals sometimes come from those closest to us, but it's also from the depths of pain that we can rise stronger than ever. Survival isn't just about breathing, it's about standing up, reclaiming the truth, your dignity, and your worth. In the real world, it's a powerful reminder. You don't need anyone's permission to live as your true self. You deserve to exist, whole, free, and on your own terms. What do you think about Isabella's journey? What would you do in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real life stories about family.